struggled to become a DM simply because they do not know how to run an encounter.
Let's fix that.
For every session, you need exactly 3 things. You need a plot, encounters, and filler. I'm going to run you through a session that I'm making for tomorrow. So for my plot, I know I want pirates, and I know I want it to be set in a monastery because I'm running one player through an opening for a monk. It makes sense to me to have the pirates go to the monastery, and then you have to figure out why they went there. So the pirates go to the monastery to squeeze money out of monks. That makes sense. Pirates would do that. Next, you need encounters. Encounters depend on time. So you want to plan the amount of encounters that you have ready based on the amount of time that you think your players are going to take per encounter and how long you're going to have to play. So for me, I am basically certain that I need to prepare 3 encounters for this next game I'm going to play. Since it's a first session with this character for the player, I am going to start off by setting the tone, and I'm going to make it a happy tone. They're going to be playing festival games. This monastery that I already talked about is going to be set on an island off the Sword Coast. So I'm going to let him play some festival games with some locals, give him that hometown feeling that he would have because this whole session is going to start in his hometown where he's comfortable. So for the next encounter, I'm going to introduce the main conflict of the session, which is going to be the pirates showing up like the Joker in that scene in The Dark Knight and just kind of wrecking up the party and ruining the place. There'll be chances for fistfights, maybe a chase scene, something like that. Just some ruckus and fighting and stuff. For the third fight, since it's set on an island, it's going to be a coastal town, and he has said that his character is going to be a fisherman. I thought it would be fun to have some kind of ship-to-ship jumping, kind of like Assassin's Creed Black Flag when you're jumping from ship to ship and you're fighting on the boats. I thought that that would be a neat third fight to close out the session with, so I just wrote swashbuckly ship fight. The last thing you need to throw together is your filler. Stuff like side quests or what to do if they wander around. For me, these are always based on geography. I try to make them modular so that whatever direction they go, this content can kind of find them there. And what you want to do with this stuff is you don't want to make it... This isn't the time where characters die and huge plot points are dropped or anything like that. This is the kind of stuff that just when your session's kind of trailing off, you want to add this stuff in to make it more cohesive and add to the story and let your characters show off. Maybe do a skill challenge here, keep things alive, but also this is where you kind of railroad your players without them knowing that you're railroading them. It's the kind of, you use this kind of stuff to guide them through the session without boring them. I also count this as the ending. You should always plan what the last thing that's going to happen in any given session is going to be, and then sort of guide the session towards that so that you can keep a cohesive plot going. In this case, I'm going to send him on a quest for a spear that's going to unite him with the rest of the party, because this session is just kind of a catch-up to keep this particular player in line with the other players that we play with. I think it's important to keep track of what creatures you're going to be using in the encounter, and for me, that means digging through piles of minis to find the perfect creatures for each of my 3 encounters. So when you plan for your encounters, I like to make little rows like this just to give myself a general outline of what's going to be going on. And you saw me dig through the box of minis, and these are the ones that I thought would be acceptable townspeople for the festival games. So just people that don't look too daunting, don't look too dangerous, the kind of people that you would see just playing around at a festival in a town. And then I wrote down the kind of festival games that I would think would make for interesting encounters. You could have a turtle shell toss that would be a strength check. You would do it versus another person, and maybe they get to keep the shell or something. Make it light and fun without being too serious, but without being completely inconsequential. You could look up a puzzle. I'm actually not very good for puzzles, but I'm sure you could go on Google and find a good puzzle. Or if you wanted to go super RP heavy and have a lot of fun with a table, if you weren't playing with one person like I am, you could do like an NPC versus player sing-off. Just lighthearted, fun stuff that everybody at the table would enjoy. And you have to kind of know what the table is going to enjoy. It's also important to note that encounter number 3 shouldn't eclipse 1/3 of your time spent for the total session. So again, just like the last encounter, I piled up all the people that I thought would look acceptable as pirates and put them on top of encounter 2 and wrote down a general outline of how I wanted that encounter to go. You would have the general ruckus, you would roleplay all that, and then play out a fist fight. The fist fight could lead to a chase scene, and in my opinion, the winner should be chasing the loser. So if your player is about to get beaten down by pirates, they're probably going to run away, and then you have a chase scene where the pirates are chasing the player. Or if the pirates think they're going to lose, their pirate captain might just hoof it and run away, and then the player gets to chase after the pirate. If he doesn't, then you pretty much just take it to roleplay and find a way to shove them along, and I'll actually talk about that later. For the third fight, as I said earlier, I wanted to have that boat fight and just have a really narrative-driven combat with a ton of immersion where your players can feel powerful and like they're doing something really cool and really engross them in the story and let them have like a really story-driven climax. And that's when you sort of, after that, you get to the end of the session and you want to kind of recap the session, sum up what everybody did, make everybody feel good, and then build up what's going to happen in the next session. So you either hit them with a cliffhanger so that they're at the edge of their seats for the next session and they can't wait to come back, or hit them with promises of really cool stuff that's going to happen at the next one, and then they're like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to do that. And you'll have players that were satisfied with a story-driven session. And the last thing I really want to touch on is for the specific campaign that I'm talking about here, or I guess I should say the specific session that I'm talking about here, the kind of stuff that I would use as filler. So this island is going to have mountains on it, so you can have them meet like a Sherpa, and if they don't roll a high enough persuasion check or a survival check, they get lost in the mountains, or if they do roll really well, then they can find a little shortcut that hurries them along. And you use narrative stuff like that to engross the player in the setting. And then I also pulled aside a couple of minis that I saw that I thought would be out of the box ideas that I could pull out if maybe everything felt a little bit too flat. So I found these minis that look like horrible seabound abominations, and you could have the captain have tamed a couple like gross, disgusting eldritch monsters of some kind, and he unleashes those on the guy, and he'll be like, holy crap, what's going on here? I thought this was just going to be me beating up pirates, and now these disgusting shark crab monsters are trying to gnaw my face off. And they'll certainly remember a thing like that. Or you could have a combat. I found a little ballista here. You could have a combat where the player comes up with a strategy to distract his enemies and then picks up a ballista and starts to just unload on people with these huge arrows. And that'll feel pretty good too. And you can use random stuff like that. In my case, finding it in your pile of miniatures. But maybe you have ideas that you already wanted to use, or you could just ask people on Facebook forums and stuff, or maybe you have a random images saved in your phone that you have been like, oh man, this would be a really cool encounter idea. Bust those out whenever you feel like it. It's really simple, and you can make up the stats for everything. You can make up the rules for everything. You're the dungeon master. You can do whatever you want. We did end up playing yesterday. The festival went really, really well. There was a cool roleplay thing that happened there. That was probably the most exciting part of the entire session, which I wasn't expecting. And then when the pirates showed up, everything kind of went off the rails, which was fine. You have to prepare for that. And the most important skill that you're going to have as a DM is being able to just make stuff up. There was no fist fight. There was basically no chase. The chase ended up kind of being lame. But basically the second and third encounter didn't go as planned. The third encounter didn't even happen. It ended up just being this really story-heavy, world-building, backstory-filling session, which was great. It's got a lot of stuff that I'll use in the future that I'll be able to call back to. So I'm certainly glad we did it. And it's a perfect example of why I don't sweat too much about planning, because if you spend 10 hours planning a campaign and then things go off the rails and you can't use anything that you planned, it kind of feels like a big waste. Whereas if you plan things loosely and get good at ad-libbing and just understanding how a basic story works and sort of guiding players through that, you usually end up saving yourself time and a lot of mental headaches.